Live TV has delivered some of the most shocking and unforgettable moments in history. From on-air tragedies to unexpected outbursts, these incidents left audiences stunned, questioning what they had just witnessed. The raw, unfiltered nature of live broadcasting means anything can happen, and sometimes it's disturbingly unforgettable. On the morning of January 28, 1986, America tuned in with a rare, united sense of anticipation. It was a day that was supposed to mark a hopeful new chapter in space exploration, a mission not just for science, but for inspiration. The Space Shuttle Challenger, set to embark on mission STS-51L, carried 7 astronauts, including a schoolteacher named Christa McAuliffe, who was selected from thousands to become the first civilian and educator in space. For millions of students across the country, her presence transformed this launch into a personal event. Classrooms paused lessons to watch it live. Parents, educators, and the press rallied around the idea that this was a turning point, a blending of space science and public engagement. But within 73 seconds of liftoff, that hopeful moment dissolved into horror as the Challenger broke apart in midair, a bright fireball suddenly replacing the elegant arc of the shuttle's ascent. What looked like an explosion unfolded in front of stunned eyes. Viewers, including children, teachers, and news anchors, were struck silent as the twin booster rockets spiraled off course and a twisted cloud of smoke remained where a proud vehicle had just been. There were no survivors. The crew, Commander Francis Scobie, pilot Michael J. Smith, mission specialists Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, and Judith Resnick, payload specialist Gregory Jarvis, and Christa McAuliffe had been lost in what was later revealed to be a preventable catastrophe. Investigations showed that the cause of the failure was a faulty O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. These rings, essentially rubber gaskets designed to prevent hot gas from escaping, had become brittle in the unusually cold Florida morning. The night before the launch, temperatures had dropped below freezing, a rarity for the area. Engineers at Morton Thiokol, the manufacturer of the boosters, expressed serious concerns. Some pleaded with NASA to postpone the launch, warning that the O-rings might not hold. But amid immense schedule pressure, public attention, and political stakes, NASA officials pressed forward. When the shuttle launched, the O-rings failed almost immediately, allowing hot gases to escape and burn through the external fuel tank. This led to the structural disintegration of the shuttle, not an explosion in the Hollywood sense, but a collapse of the vehicle under extreme aerodynamic forces. The Rogers Commission, formed by President Reagan to investigate the disaster, laid bare a haunting combination of technical flaws and organizational failures. It wasn't just the hardware, it was the culture. Engineers had known for years that the O-rings had issues. Warnings were raised but routinely dismissed or downplayed. The commission exposed a communication breakdown within NASA where concerns from lower-level engineers never reached decision-makers or were actively suppressed. The result was a tragedy not born of chance, but of complacency. The Challenger disaster sent shockwaves through NASA and the country. Shuttle missions were suspended for nearly 3 years. There was a deep reevaluation of safety protocols, risk communication, and organizational decision-making. Christa McAuliffe's dream of teaching from space never came to life, but her legacy reshaped how space exploration would be approached moving forward. The Challenger's crew is now remembered not just for how they died, but for why they flew, to explore, to teach, to push boundaries. It remains one of the most powerful reminders that in the pursuit of greatness, caution, honesty, and accountability are not optional, they are essential. On the morning of July 15, 1974, in the small city of Sarasota, Florida, a young television journalist named Christine Chubbuk arrived at WXLT-TV, Channel 40, carrying a bag that held more than just scripts. She was calm, composed, and even joked with her colleagues before going live on air. What they didn't know was that Christine had spent weeks preparing for what would become one of the most shocking and tragic moments in broadcast history. She would take her own life, live on television. Christine wasn't your average local news anchor. She was smart, serious about her work, and often clashed with station management over their preference for sensational, violent stories. She believed in meaningful journalism, not just blood, guts, and car crashes. Ironically, that was exactly the kind of content her station was chasing, and exactly what she referenced before ending her life. That morning, during the broadcast of Suncoast Digest, a public affairs show she usually hosted, Christine read a few local news items. Then, without changing her tone or demeanor, she looked into the camera and said, "In keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts and in living color, you are going to see another first: attempted suicide." Before anyone could react, Christine pulled out a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver from beneath her desk, placed it behind her right ear, and pulled the trigger. The screen quickly faded to black. Viewers at home were left stunned, and in the studio, chaos broke out. Her co-workers initially thought it might be a dark joke or a twisted stunt, but when they reached her and saw the severity of the wound, the horrifying reality hit. Christine was rushed to Sarasota Memorial Hospital, where she remained in critical condition for 14 hours before succumbing to her injury. She was just 29 years old. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. Christine had been suffering from severe depression for years. She had even been seeing a psychiatrist, though her family said they didn't realize how deep her struggles truly were. She lived at home with her parents and had often expressed feelings of loneliness and frustration, especially over her lack of social connections and romantic relationships. Just weeks before the incident, she told a colleague she had bought a gun and planned to do something crazy. They thought she was joking. Christine had gone as far as to write a complete script for that day's broadcast, including a post-shooting bulletin to be read by another anchor. In it, she even included her condition and the name of the hospital she would be taken to. She had also requested to do a special segment on suicide not long before her death, hoping to interview local officials about prevention and mental health. The request was denied. After her death, the network and station were heavily criticized, not only for their content policies, but for failing to recognize the signs. However, Christine had been deliberate in hiding the full extent of her intentions. The video of her final broadcast was never aired again. Only one known tape existed, which was turned over to her family and later reportedly destroyed. Christine Chubbuk's tragic final act left behind more than shock. It sparked vital conversations about mental illness, media ethics, and the human cost of sensational news. Her story was later retold in documentaries and dramatized in the critically acclaimed 2016 film Christine. Today, her name is often remembered alongside discussions about suicide awareness, the pressures of journalism, and the importance of recognizing cries for help, even when they're masked by a smile and a sign on script. If there was ever a moment in American history that played out like a surreal crime drama, live, unfiltered, and utterly shocking, it was the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald on November 24, 1963. Just 2 days earlier, the nation had been devastated by the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who was shot while riding in a motorcade through Dallas, Texas. The prime suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, had been swiftly arrested, and though his guilt was widely assumed, he had not yet stood trial. He was a former Marine, a drifter, a defector to the Soviet Union, and an enigmatic figure with many unanswered questions swirling around him. The country was hungry for answers, but those answers died with Oswald, in front of a live television audience. It all happened at the Dallas Police Headquarters, where Oswald was being transferred from the city jail to the county jail. The building was crawling with reporters, flashing cameras, and tense law enforcement officers. The press had been alerted to the transfer, and in a decision that would be heavily criticized later, they were allowed to watch from the basement garage. Oswald, handcuffed and flanked by police officers, was led out through a corridor in what was meant to be a routine transfer. But just as he stepped into the garage, a man suddenly lunged forward from the crowd, raised a small .38 caliber revolver, and fired a single shot into Oswald's abdomen. The shooter was Jack Ruby, a 52-year-old Dallas nightclub owner with ties to the criminal underworld and a fondness for the local police. His motives, to this day, remain clouded in mystery. Ruby later claimed that he was overwhelmed with grief and anger over Kennedy's death and wanted to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the agony of a drawn-out trial. But many weren't convinced. Conspiracy theories immediately exploded. Was Ruby silencing Oswald on behalf of the mafia, the CIA, foreign powers? Or was he just a deranged man looking for his moment in the spotlight? The fact that Ruby had such easy access to Oswald right inside a police station only fueled suspicions of a deeper cover-up. Millions of Americans watched the event unfold in real time. It was the first homicide ever broadcast live on national television, Viewers saw Oswald grimace in pain, collapse to the floor, and be quickly surrounded by stunned officers. He was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where Kennedy had been pronounced dead just 2 days earlier, but Oswald didn't survive. With that single gunshot, the opportunity to fully unravel the truth behind the president's assassination vanished. In the aftermath, Ruby was arrested and eventually convicted of murder. He was sentenced to death, but his conviction was overturned on appeal. Before he could be retried, Ruby died of cancer in 1967. To this day, countless books, films, documentaries, and investigations have tried to piece together the puzzle of what really happened in those chaotic days. The Warren Commission concluded that both Oswald and Ruby acted alone, but that answer has satisfied few. For many, Oswald's live execution only deepened the mystery and left wounds in the American psyche that have never fully healed. The killing of Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't just a bizarre moment in television history. It was a turning point that left an entire nation haunted, not just by what they had seen, but by what they would never know. The tragic story of Daniel V. Jones is one of those moments that left a permanent scar on live television history, and even more so on how we view desperation, mental health, and the healthcare system. On April 30th, 1998, during the busy afternoon rush hour in Los Angeles, 40-year-old Jones drove his white pickup truck onto an overpass of the 110 freeway near Harbor City, parked his vehicle, and staged a disturbing protest that would soon unfold live on countless TV screens across America. Jones wasn't just some random man with a grudge. He was someone suffering from both cancer and HIV, feeling utterly let down by his HMO, which he claimed had failed him repeatedly. According to letters and videos he had prepared ahead of time, Jones was furious over delays in treatment, a lack of compassion, and what he felt was a system more interested in profit than people. When he stopped his car that day, he had a shotgun, several handwritten protest signs, a gasoline canister, a video camera, and heartbreakingly, his dog with him. Television helicopters arrived swiftly, and news stations, perhaps sensing something dramatic unfolding, began broadcasting the standoff live. For over an hour, the nation watched as Jones held up signs blaming HMOs for prioritizing money over lives, urging people to live freely and fight for safer health care. At one point, in a moment that deeply disturbed viewers, he released his dog from the truck only to tragically shoot it moments later, a gesture that left many shocked and confused. But the most horrifying moment was still to come. After standing atop his truck and pouring gasoline over himself, Jones, still being filmed in real time, lit himself on fire and then, while engulfed in flames, took his own life with a single shotgun blast to the head. The camera captured everything. Several stations, caught off guard and without a time delay, broadcast the entire sequence live to unsuspecting viewers, including children who happened to be watching TV that afternoon. The backlash was immediate and fierce. News networks were slammed for airing something so graphic without warning, and the incident led to many stations reevaluating their live coverage policies. But beyond the media firestorm, Jones's final act raised haunting questions about the state of America's healthcare system. Was he mentally ill, pushed to the edge by disease and despair? Or was this a calculated, tragic message to the world? A final cry for help and justice from someone who felt invisible? In his pre-recorded tapes and notes, Jones made it clear that he didn't want to die in silence. He wanted people to know how deeply he had suffered, not just from illness, but from neglect and bureaucracy. While many were understandably horrified by the nature of his protest, others couldn't help but acknowledge the bitter truth behind his anger. His suicide, as gruesome and tragic as it was, brought attention to the very real pain of navigating a broken healthcare system. Today, the Daniel V. Jones incident remains one of the most unforgettable and chilling moments ever aired on live TV. It's remembered not just for its shock value, but for the man behind the flames, a man who felt so unheard and unsupported that he chose to make his final stand in the most public way possible. His death was not just a protest. It was a cry for dignity in a world that had, by his account, stripped him of it. Tommy Cooper was one of Britain's most iconic comedians, instantly recognizable with his towering height, booming voice, and that ever-present red fez perched on his head. With his unique blend of slapstick humor and intentionally clumsy magic tricks, he had a way of making people laugh with his sheer presence alone. But on the evening of April 15th, 1984, what began as another night of entertainment on a live television show quickly turned into one of the most tragic and shocking moments in British broadcast history. That Sunday, Cooper was performing on a popular variety program called Live from Her Majesty's, which was being aired live to millions of viewers on ITV. The show was hosted by Jimmy Tarbuck and featured a number of musical and comedic acts. When Tommy Cooper walked onto the stage, the crowd greeted him with enthusiastic applause. It was just another performance in a long and storied career, or so it seemed. Cooper began his routine in classic fashion, delivering one-liners, fumbling through deliberately terrible magic tricks, and using his imposing frame to great comedic effect. But then, as he was in the middle of a bit involving a cloak and some props handed to him by his assistant, he suddenly staggered backwards and collapsed against the curtain. The fall looked theatrical, almost like part of the act. The audience, familiar with his slapstick antics, burst into laughter, assuming it was just another physical gag from the master of comedic timing. However, after a few seconds, it became evident that something was very wrong. Cooper did not get back up. His assistant, still on stage, appeared visibly confused and concerned. Behind the scenes, stagehands quickly realized that Cooper had suffered a medical emergency. The director of the live broadcast made the quick decision to cut to a commercial break to avoid further confusion and give medical staff time to respond. Backstage, the atmosphere shifted from confusion to panic. Cooper had collapsed from a massive heart attack. Efforts were made to resuscitate him, and paramedics rushed to the scene. Meanwhile, the show continued after the commercial break, with other performers taking the stage. Most of them had no idea what had just happened. The producers decided to carry on with the program to avoid alarming the live audience or the viewers at home. Despite the swift medical response, Tommy Cooper was later pronounced dead at Westminster Hospital. He was 63 years old. The news of his death was not officially announced until after the show had ended, leaving viewers stunned when they learned the truth. Many had been watching in real time and had no idea that the moment they had laughed at was the final moment of a beloved performer's life. The incident had a profound impact on fans, colleagues, and the entertainment industry as a whole. Cooper's sudden death on stage became a haunting reminder of the unpredictability of live performance and the fine line between comedy and tragedy. His legacy, however, has endured. Generations continue to enjoy his performances through old recordings, and he remains a symbol of classic British comedy. Even decades later, the surreal and tragic nature of Tommy Cooper's final performance is remembered as one of the most poignant moments in television history. Though he died doing what he loved, most making people laugh, his final bow was a moment of heartbreaking reality that left a nation in shock and mourning.